What is this? Why Gen Z doesn't get the I hate my wife joke.
A boomer walks into a family barbecue. His wife is standing across the yard talking to someone. His nephew asks how things are going. He nods toward her and says, "Well, she's still here." The men his age laugh. The nephew smiles politely and has no idea what just happened. Later at the same barbecue, someone makes a comment about the food and the
Wait, should I guess what this means? Because I really don't think I've ever heard this. You know who makes the worst food than this? My wife. Just shitting on your wife? Like,
boomer said,
some misogynistic stuff?
"You know who makes worse food than this? My wife." More laughter from the same group. The nephew is now actively confused. These two people have been married for 38 years. They live together. They chose this.
Is that a married people thing or a Gen X thing? The I hate my wife. No. It's definitely not a married people thing. Because married people my age and a little older and younger are like pretty happy with each other. Like pretty like
Why
what's the word? Like promotional, like positive.
is everything a joke
My
at
wife
her
is the
expense? He pulls out his phone and texts his friend. My uncle
That's like better. It's like my wife is better than me.
keeps making jokes about hating his wife. Is he okay? His friend responds with a skull emoji and nothing else. That exchange right there is the entire topic in miniature. Two people at the same barbecue hearing the same joke, one laughing and one filing a mental wellness check. The humor didn't land. It didn't even register as humor. It registered as a cry for help. My name is Eddie Freeman. Every week on this channel, we look at why generations experience the world completely differently, and why what's funny to one generation makes another generation deeply uncomfortable. Why are they like that? Subscribe if that's your kind of thing. To understand where this joke came from, you have to go back further than boomers. A lot further. The nagging wife and the hen...
Like when old people started getting a little racist, and hey, that's not like I guess it was just a thing back then, right? It makes me so. I'm just like, yeah.
...pecked husband are not boomer inventions. They're ancient. The battle of the sexes dynamic has been a staple of comedy going back to vaudeville, to early radio, to the very first sitcoms that landed.
Okay, I gotta react to vaudeville. I saw Danny Mullen make a video about vaudeville that was making crazy humor about important topics, but with like mimes and weird stuff, right?
Vaudeville was variety entertainment, and for about 50 years it dominated American showbiz. It worked like this. A band of lowlifes would roll from town to town, often to small theaters in places like Wyoming and Montana, offering audiences demented, lowbrow entertainment spectacles week after week. Does that sound a little familiar to you?
...ended in American living rooms in the 1950s. The Honeymooners, I Love Lucy, Married with Children much later. The comedic grammar was always the same. Domestic life is miserable, wives are the source of that misery, and the husband's suffering is the joke. Boomers didn't create that template. They inherited it. It was what comedy looked like when they were growing up. It was on television every night, it was in newspaper cartoons, it was what stand-up comedians did on talk shows. Rodney Dangerfield built an entire career out of it. Phyllis Diller made her husband, Fang, the centerpiece of her act for decades. This was the comedic water boomers swam in from childhood. By the time they were adults with their own long marriages, it was already hardwired as a comedic instinct. You complain about your spouse at the barbecue. You roll your eyes at the mention of her name. You make the leave pass joke when someone asks how you got out of the house for the evening. The room laughs.
So you don't really hate her.
Because everyone in the room has the
It's just fun.
same shared reference. The joke means, marriage is hard, we all know it, we're still here, that's funny. It is genuinely a form of bonding. Not cruelty, bonding.
Okay. No. It's just like when you tell your boy, like when you tell the bro, like, haha, yeah, you see, and then see you later, dude. Pick up the phone with a slur.
When you don't share that context. Gen Z came of age in a completely different emotional landscape around relationships. They watched divorce rates climb. They watched millennials burn through situationships and talking stages and spend years processing their relationship trauma in public. They grew up in a culture where therapy language is normal, where emotional...
I hate the therapy people the therapy language. People like, oh my god, I cannot stand that. A girl's going to therapy anytime they get sad.
Honesty
It's
is
like,
expected, and where the idea of staying in a relationship that makes you miserable is treated as something to examine
or therapy being the solution to anything. Like, I think you just need some therapy,
and
man.
not joke about. They also grew up watching their boomer relatives make these jokes while standing next to the spouse they were supposedly
I
complaining.
was burned down. I lost my job. My mom died. My cat killed himself. I found him hanging by a thread, literally, in the basement. He did it himself. And then they'll just be like, yeah, I think you need therapy.
About. And the spouse is laughing too, or smiling, or rolling her eyes in a way that is clearly its own kind of participation. To a 22-year-old raised on authenticity culture, that's deeply confusing. If you hate her, why are you still here? If you don't hate her, why are you saying you do? What is the joke exactly? Where is the layer I'm supposed to understand? There's an observation that captures this perfectly. Someone wrote, previous generations circulate jokes about how much married life sucks, and then those same generations ask why nobody is getting married anymore. That's the tension in one sentence. The joke that was supposed to be harmless venting ended up functioning as decades of ambient advertising for how miserable marriage is. Younger generations absorbed it and drew their own conclusions. There's also a real gender dimension here that Gen Z picks up on and boomers mostly don't see. The I hate my wife joke has a direction. It almost always goes one way. Husband complains about wife, wife is the problem, wife is the nag, the drag, the ball and chain. There are versions where about husbands too, but the default direction of the joke, the version that became culturally
alpha?
embedded, points at the woman. That came directly from the social structure of mid-20th century marriage.
Why?
Women couldn't have their own bank accounts without their husband's name on them until the 1970s. Divorce was stigmatized and in many cases practiced.
You couldn't have a bank account without your husband's name on it? What if you were single? So if you're single, you just couldn't get a bank account if you're a girl? Why would you need a bank account back then, though? Because, like, low-key, you didn't have credit cards. I feel like that's, like, the only reason you need a bank. Is to buy stuff on a credit card. And you probably weren't buying things online. So, like, why not just keep your cash in a safe? But still, that is crazy.
Inaccessible. Marriage wasn't just a romantic choice.
Because you probably couldn't buy stocks either.
It was an economic necessity for women and a social expectation for everyone. You didn't always...
Oh. Dude, wait, I didn't think about that. So you probably had to get married if you were a woman. Or not had to, but, like, kind of, right? Like, there's probably a lot of things that you couldn't do if you didn't have a husband.
marry the person you
Could you drive? Yeah, I think
most wanted to be
I don't
with.
know.
You married someone acceptable, and then you figured it out. When you put two people in a legally and economically binding arrangement,
That's why it doesn't work.
they had limited ability to exit.
You gotta find the one and be in love with your soul's mate.
Of course there's friction. Of course there's resentment underneath the surface. The joke was a release valve for a pressure that the culture had created. You couldn't leave.
What movie is that?
You couldn't always talk about it honestly. So you made a joke at the barbecue and everyone laughed because everyone understood. Gen Z doesn't understand. Not because they're naive, because they live in a world where leaving is actually an option, and talking about it honestly is actually expected. The pressure the joke was releasing doesn't
Emma?
exist for them
Hey, shout out Emma Chamberlain.
in the same form.
That's the YouTube goat for real, the vlogging
So
goat.
the valve just looks broken. There's one more layer that makes this funnier and sadder depending on which side of it you're on. A lot of the boomers making these jokes are actually fine. That's the part Gen Z can't process. The couples doing the I hate my wife routine at dinner have been together for 35 years and have no intention of going anywhere. The joke is not a signal of hidden misery. It is just the language they developed for talking about marriage
But do you actually hate her?
with other people
Is her cooking actually the worst?
who have been married as long as they have. It's shorthand. It's an inside reference. Long married couples have always found each other annoying in small ways, and have always found humor in that. The joke is that marriage is hard, and we're still here. And we know you understand because you're still here too. The wife who's been married to this man for 3 decades is usually standing right there. She's not devastated. She's probably saying something equally unflattering about him 2 minutes later, and everyone
That girl almost swallowed him.
married to this man for 3 decades is usually standing right there. She's not devastated. She's probably saying
Bro, he about to do a Mr. Beast 24 hours in the coffin
Something-
challenge in the grill. Look at that. He about to do a Mr. Beast challenge.
equally unflattering about him 2 minutes later, and everyone is laughing again. To the boomer in the room, this is warmth.
24
This is the
hours in the
comedy
grill.
of shared survival.
And
These
it's
people
on.
have raised kids together, buried parents together, gotten through financial disasters and health scares, and every mundane Tuesday for 40 years. The joke is the intimacy of the relationship expressed in the only language their generation
Wait, I did not realize that. Gen X, because that was 80s, so 60s. You were already in your 20s when you got married. It's 2026, so you've been with that person for 40 years.
was given
That's
for it.
insane.
To the Gen Z nephew,
insane.
it's a red flag wrapped in khaki shorts at a barbecue. Neither of them is entirely wrong. The joke carries real history inside it. It came from a time when marriage was structured in ways that created genuine resentment and gave people almost no tools to process or express it except humor. That history doesn't disappear because the joke got passed down. At the same time, Gen Z's discomfort isn't oversensitivity. It's a legitimate response to language that, stripped of its original context, sounds like a person publicly dismissing someone they chose to spend their life with. When you don't have the decoder ring, the joke doesn't land as bonding, it lands as contempt.
Is there how much truth is in that?
In 1985, the clapper turned a
The clapper. Okay.
Damn, I'm on my Britney shit. Oops, I hit again.